My name is Mila, and I am 30 years old. I woke up from a 9-hour spine surgery with my mouth dry, my back on fire, and a fog in my head so thick it felt like I was still underwater. The first thing I saw wasn't a doctor or a nurse, it was my phone vibrating, nonstop on the bedside table, lighting up the dim recovery room like it was possessed. 73 missed calls. My heart started pounding before I even unlocked the screen. Because nobody gets 73 calls unless something is terribly wrong. My hands were shaking as I listened to the voicemail from my father. His voice rushed and strangely calm at the same time, saying words that didn't make sense at first. We sold your condo to pay for your sister's wedding. You were unconscious, so we signed for you. I stared at the wall, trying to process it. Then the next line hit harder than the pain in my spine. 45,000 gone. I wanted to scream, but my body wouldn't cooperate. All that came out was a broken breath as the room tilted. That condo wasn't just a property. It was my safety. My proof that every overtime shift, every skipped vacation, every lonely night grinding forward had meant something. I could barely move my legs, couldn't sit up without help. And yet somehow, while I was unconscious, my parents decided my life's work was negotiable. My sister's wedding was in 3 weeks. And there I was, barely able to walk, realizing the people who were supposed to protect me had treated me like a signature, not a daughter. As memories came rushing back, so did the context they conveniently ignored. The surgery wasn't cosmetic or optional. It was urgent. Months of nerve damage had finally caught up with me, and the doctors said if I waited any longer, I might not walk properly again. I remember my mother crying when I signed the hospital forms, my father squeezing my hand and promising, "Don't worry about anything. Focus on getting better." I trusted them. I handed over my phone before anesthesia, believing the world would still respect my boundaries while I was under. I was wrong. When the nurse asked if I wanted water, I asked instead if she could help me sit up so I could call my parents back. Every movement felt like glass grinding in my spine, but rage has a way of giving you strength you shouldn't have. My father answered on the first ring, relieved, almost cheerful, as if he'd been waiting for praise. He repeated it like it was good news, that the condo sale covered the wedding venue, the flowers, the guest list, the upgrades. When I asked how they could legally do that, he said, "We're family. You would have agreed." I realized then they didn't just take my money. They took my consent and rewrote it to suit themselves. The room felt smaller as he talked about my sister's dream day, how stressed everyone had been, how grateful I should be that my investment helped keep peace in the family. Peace. I was lying there with tubes in my arms, barely able to breathe through the pain, while my parents justified signing my name because it was convenient. I asked if they even waited for me to wake up. There was a pause, then my mother's voice slipped in, softer but no less sharp, saying they couldn't risk delays, that venues don't wait for recovery rooms. I hung up because if I didn't, I would have said something I couldn't take back. Tears came then, not the dramatic kind, but the quiet ones that soak into the pillow while your chest aches. I kept replaying the voicemail in my head. You were unconscious, so we signed for you. Like that made it reasonable. Like my body being cut open gave them permission to cut into my future. The next days passed in a blur of painkillers, physical therapy, and paperwork. A hospital social worker helped me request copies of the sale documents, and each page felt heavier than the last. My signature stared back at me, slightly off, rushed like a bad imitation. They didn't even try to hide it. Friends visited and told me to rest, to not stress. But how do you rest when the floor under your life has been sold out from under you? Every night when the ward got quiet, my mind went to dark places. How I'd pay for rehab. What would happen if complications kept me from working? Why my parents always chose my sister's happiness over my stability. I remembered birthdays forgotten, achievements minimized, sacrifices expected. This wasn't a one-time betrayal. It was a pattern that had finally cost $425,000. By the time I was discharged, I could barely walk with a brace, and my phone was full of messages about wedding fittings and seating charts, like nothing had happened. Nobody asked if I was okay. They asked if I was over it yet. Sitting in the passenger seat on the ride home, every bump sending lightning through my back, I understood one thing with terrifying clarity. They thought this story was over. They thought I'd heal, forgive, and quietly disappear into the background while the wedding went on. But as I stared out the window, pain pulsing with every heartbeat, a different thought took hold. If they believed I had nothing left, they were dangerously wrong. By the time I got home, the painkillers wore off faster than the anger. Lying awake at night with my back locked in a brace, I replayed every detail not just of the sale, but of my entire relationship with my parents. They acted like I was dramatic, emotional, ungrateful. They kept repeating the same line over and over. It's just money. Mayella. Family comes first. What they didn't know, what they never bothered to ask, was that the condo they sold wasn't my only safety net. Years ago, quietly and without telling anyone, I had bought another house. A small, unremarkable place. Nothing flashy, but fully paid off and registered only in my name. I bought it after watching my parents co-sign loans for my sister while telling me to figure it out myself. That second house was my backup plan. My insurance against exactly this kind of betrayal. And now, lying there, barely able to walk, I realized something powerful. They thought they had taken everything from me, but they hadn't. 3 days after being discharged, still moving slowly and wincing with every step, I made one call. Not to my parents, not to my sister. I called a lawyer. I told him everything, from the surgery, to the voicemail, to the forged signature. He was quiet for a moment, then said something that made my hands tremble. Not from fear, but from relief. Mila, this is serious. They committed fraud. Hearing it out loud changed something inside me. I wasn't overreacting. I wasn't being selfish. What they did wasn't just cruel, it was illegal. Over the next week, while my parents were busy finalizing wedding menus and rehearsal dinners, my lawyer was busy filing paperwork. Subpoenas, injunctions, notices that couldn't be ignored. I stayed silent on purpose. Let them believe I was weak, distracted, broken. Let them think the story ended with me losing my condo. The wedding was getting closer. 3 weeks. I watched the countdown like a storm on the horizon. My mother called, asking if I'd attend, saying it would mean a lot to the family. My sister texted me a dress color and told me not to. Make things awkward, not. Once did either of them ask how my recovery was going. Not once did they apologize. Meanwhile, my lawyer confirmed what I already suspected. The sale could be frozen. The money could be traced. And because I had proof I was unconscious, heavily sedated and medically incapacitated, the signatures meant nothing. The buyers were notified. The funds were locked. The $425,000 they thought was safely spent? Suddenly unavailable. I didn't smile. I didn't celebrate. I waited. 2 days before the wedding, my father finally showed up at my door. He looked smaller somehow, like the confidence had leaked out of him. He didn't ask how I was doing either. He demanded to know why the bank had frozen the accounts. I told him calmly that I had woken up from surgery, remembered who I was, and decided to protect myself. That's when the yelling started. About embarrassment, about family reputation, about how I was ruining my sister's big day. I let him talk until he ran out of breath. Then I said the sentence that ended everything. You sold my condo while I was unconscious. You forged my name. I didn't consent. And now, you'll answer for it. He stared at me like he was seeing a stranger. Maybe he was. The next morning, chaos exploded. Vendors demanded payment. The venue threatened cancellation. Guests were already arriving. My sister called me screaming, crying, accusing me of jealousy and spite. I listened quietly, then reminded her that the wedding was funded by stolen money. I told her the truth, that while they were busy planning, I was barely learning how to walk again. That while they were celebrating love, I was recovering from a 9-hour spine surgery alone. She hung up on me. An hour later, my mother called, this time begging, apologizing, promising anything. But apologies after consequences aren't remorse, they're panic. The wedding didn't go the way anyone expected. Some vendors pulled out, others downgraded services. Whispers spread fast. By the time the ceremony happened, it was smaller, quieter, Stripped of the luxury my parents had bragged about. I didn't attend. I was at home, standing on my own 2 feet for the first time without assistance, holding documents that proved something more important than money. I owned my life. And when the legal process finished months later, the condo was returned to me. Titles restored. Records corrected. My parents faced penalties they never imagined. Not because I wanted revenge, but because actions have consequences. They never knew about my other house until it was too late. That knowledge was mine alone, and it stayed that way. What they took taught me a lesson they never will. Love that costs you your dignity isn't love at all. I didn't lose a condo. I lost illusions. And I gained something far stronger, clarity.